Well, hello and welcome to the PMQ live update for today, Wednesday, September 1st. It is already September in the year of 2021. That is crazy. We are back into doing some live updates. I have missed it. I did one last week, but today I get to do one with a good friend of mine, Mr. Michael Kalanty. I don't know if you guys caught his last one, but he's got some great information about dough. We did sourdough starter. But today, Mike, why don't you, for those who didn't catch you last time, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do, and then what we're going to be talking about today.
All right. Well, thank you for having me back, Brian, and welcome everybody. So I am a bread baker and a product developer, and I'm also a sensory analyst. I work a lot with bakery production houses, and we'll take their products and we'll say, all right, let's run these sensory tests on them, and let's troubleshoot that back into the production process, because a lot of times we can find out what's hindering your dough or your bread or whatever from being the best it can just by looking backwards through that. So I work as a consultant in that regard. I teach in the Bay Area if they let me. Well, they did for a while, but now they were like, no, you can't do it anymore. So, and I have written several books about bread baking, and I have online classes. So that's who I am. And I'm here today. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, no, I was going to say that's pretty succinct and to the point. I was looking for some pictures, but it is Artisan Bread Baker and author Michael Kalanty. And his books are How to Bake Bread and How to Bake, get this, more bread. And you can find them on Amazon. And I tell you what, man, these things are substantial. They are not, they are a big, thick book, and it's got a lot of information. But I will let Mike continue with what we're going to be looking at today. So what are we going to talk about?
That's great. Thanks for that. Promo there. And yes, absolutely. You know, just as a matter of fact, the first book weighs in at exactly 1 kilo. So you can put it on that old school baker scale, and you can scale your dough accordingly. So
that is awesome.
Just a little, not done intentionally, just something one of my students pointed out to me. But
I was going to say, yeah, did you add extra pages or take some out? But
no, cool. It just came in right like that, right, the right amount of ink and everything. So
okay, and while we do have the audience, real quick, I want to let people know that you can ask your questions in the comment section on wherever you're watching this. Just type them there, and I'll see them, and we can ask it. So without further ado, I'm going to let you, Mike, tell us what we're doing today and not interrupt you any further.
Thank you, Brian. So again, welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time to check in with us. And about a month ago, I gave a presentation for the International Bread Symposium at Johnson & Wales remotely, and I spoke on the prebiotic value of bread and how to get nutrition into that so it really becomes more of a functional ingredient for your customers. And so I took that, and then Brian said, you know what, can we like hone that down so it's just for pizzaiolas and you know, pizza makers? And I said, you know, we can absolutely do that. So that's what I want to present to you today. So yeah, and as Brian said, if you have any questions, type them in the chat room, because that'll help me. A lot of times I can answer the question just as part of what I'm talking about. So let's begin the slide presentation, Brian. Okay, so here's my superhero rendering of how not just me, but anybody can take excuse me. And then in my left hand, I have prebiotic molecules. And the idea is, let's get these into the bread, or in this case, the pizza. So in the next slide, please. And so I start out with a disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not here as Dr. Oz to say, all right, this is what will help you with your health, etc. I'm not here for that. I'm a baker, and I work with commercialization of products into a space where consumers are bombarded with all this type of information about probiotics. I have to eat this every day. This does this for gut health, IBS, all of that. And so what I'm here to do is to clarify that information for you as a baker, as a pizza maker, so you can talk intelligibly with your customers about this and help them understand what is really happening and a lot of times what is not happening. So with that, let's go into the next slide. So here's just a quick overview of what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about the consumer landscape. So you can say, all right, how important is prebiotics in my pizza dough for my customers? We'll talk about what the microbiome is, what the gut is, and more importantly, what it is not. And then I'll show you how to make a prebiotic pizza dough using really ingredients you already have on hand. So let's jump in and go to the next slide. So the important thing always is to know your customer, and they are really subjected to so much information, and hardly any of it comes from bread or pizza world itself. It comes from everything else. It comes from Jamie Lee Curtis on TV. It comes from commercials they'll see on the internet, etc. So it's helpful to you to understand. And let's go to the next slide.
There we go.
All right. And many of these things are fads, but other things are trends. And the important thing to know the difference between a fad is just a blip on a screen. It's here for a couple weeks, a couple months, but its trend is something that has growing teeth and feet in the community, in the consumer world. And that's what we're going to look at here. So let's see the next slide, please. Plant-based is the biggest trend right now that has been taking traction and just really making a lot of headway. And I mean, you see, I mean, yesterday, actually, I saw a barbershop in San Francisco, and they were offering plant-based haircuts. So, you know, a little tongue in cheek, but I guess, you know, no animals were harmed in the process of cutting your hair. But anyway, this has become a proven purchasing driver when it shows up in a menu or as a call out on a product that you have. So let's go to the next slide. And here we have how plant-based is broken out by age group. And so I'm not going to read this to you. I'm going to let you read it. But what I am going to point out is, like, if your audience mostly is boomers, they are not really susceptible to something being plant-based. It's more, they're going to buy something because they like it. You make it routinely. You make it your way, etc. But the younger crowds, millennials especially, are the ones who are going to say, hey, this is plant-based. This will affect their decision to buy that product or not. Let's see another trend that's going on in the next slide. The other trend right now is what's called functional nutrition. And as a call out, as a menu or an item or a call out on a loaf of bread or on a power bar, etc., functional is the biggest trend now that people are responding to. So let's take a look at that next slide so you can see what that means. And a functional ingredient is not something that necessarily tastes the best. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't taste good, but it doesn't come in with indulgence. It doesn't come in with, oh, this is the best you'll ever have, etc. No, functional ingredients do specific things in your body, like controlling your blood spike, your blood sugar, etc. They even have things now that elevate your mood. So the whole CBD market, etc. So I'm not here to tell you to put CBD in your pizza. That's up to you to do. But increasing good bacteria in your pizza dough is a functional aspect that millennials and Gen Z are really looking hard at. So let's move to the next slide. And where this all takes place is in what is being called the microbiome or gut health. And there's a bigger credibility now between what you feed your gut and how your gut treats you in terms of energy level, how you sleep, et cetera, et cetera. So let's move to the next slide. And the biggest thing that people associate with their microbiome is good bacteria. I mean, certainly there's bad bacteria and there's pathogens and things that will cause foodborne illness. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about the thousands of known species that inhabit everybody's gut, and no two people's guts have the same thing in it. So some people will react more positively to certain bacteria and other people will act to others. So let's take a look at what these good bacteria are. This is your usual suspect list of foods that are for gut health. And if you look down these things, you'll see, like, okay, right at the top, we've got Jamie Lee Curtis and her yogurt and everything. And that was really the start of it about 15 years ago. And then what people have determined is that, you know what? Let's take a look at all these other ingredients and see what they have in common. And they may not, I mean, certainly they all are not going to go on pizza. I once had a sauerkraut pizza with ham. It was a white dough, and it was actually very good. But I'm not thinking that sauerkraut pizza is really where I'm guiding you right now. Let's take a look at the next slide.
You'd be surprised, my friend.
Okay, all right. Well, you know what?
Good on pizza.
I'm a coastal guy, so a lot of times I don't know what's happening in the heart of this country. But the thing that I'm sure you saw of all of those products is that they're fermented. All of those things: kefir, sauerkraut, yogurt, and what they have in common is that they amp the flavor of the food, the shelf life of the foods, and all of these things. So fermented foods have probiotic good bacteria in them. And that is a proven fact. Let's jump to the next slide. My question to you is, all right, we know that bread and pizza dough is fermented. So why aren't they on this list? That's my challenge or my call to bakers and pizza makers. We already have Jamie Lee Curtis eating pizza, or that's what we should have. We should have Jamie Lee Curtis eating pizza and not just yogurt. So let's jump to the next slide and look at specifically what's happening now. And bread, you know, the other thing about bread and fermented dough is that it lowers the glycemic index of the product. People who have blood sugar issues, blood spikes, are very aware of glycemic index. And just as a review, the glycemic index from 0 to 100 measures how quickly that food or foods is metabolized into your bloodstream and how quickly that blood or that sugar gets in there. And so you can see at the top of the list, you've got glucose, which if you ingest glucose, I mean, if you ever had to do any blood sugar tests at your doctor's, that's what they give you. They give you glucose. They come back in an hour and they see if you're awake or you're asleep on the floor. And, you know, as we move down that list, you can see the longer that things are fermented, the lower that glycemic index is. So not only does sourdough bread have probiotics for you, it also is easier to digest and gives you less of a blood sugar spike. So it's got that going for it as well. Let's see the next slide. Go ahead,
is
please.
It because, well, the longer fermentation, you know, with that, like you said, longer fermentation, the smaller glycemic index is obviously because the yeast or the fermentation is eating up the sugars, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. You've got both the yeast eating up the sugars, and then you also have bacterial fermentation, which is breaking down other smaller molecules of glucose and dextrose. So you've got it happening on two fronts.
Okay. All right. I was just wondering that one on my own. So see if I knew what I was learning. So there we go. All right. Next slide.
So my next slide is, you think, oh, okay, I don't know if I'm going to start telling people that, oh, bread is really healthy and pizza is really healthy. Well, Okay, now here is Modern Baker. This is a company in Great Britain, and they've been marketing their breads now specifically as healthy ingredients for about 2 years now, and they are growing stronger. So they very strongly fit this functional food trends. Let's take a look at their next slide, and this is the list of the call-outs, the packaging call-outs that they have on their breads. And they are pulling no punches, and they're saying, you know what, this stuff, because it's fermented, is just flat out better for you. And plus it tastes good.
All right. Well, those are some big, like you said, some big call outs. What people is, I like how it's actively good for you right there in bold black letters. So.
All right. So now, So now that I've sold you on why functional foods are good and how it's good for your microbiome, let's make sure we all understand what the microbiome is and what it is not. So here I have a very simplistic diagram for you of where the microbiome starts. It's not part of the stomach. So when you eat that yogurt or you eat that sauerkraut, that gets into your stomach. But how much of the probiotics actually get down into the microbiome where your health is really, your mood, your sleeping is really affected? Let's look at that. So let's go to the next slide. There you go. I think I already said that. So let's.
I was getting there.
That's okay. All right. So here's the thing. Most probiotics are killed by stomach acids in the stomach. So they don't make it down into the microbiome. There's a list of the ones on the left that do, and you can see that lactobacillus, which is a side effect of fermentation, those make it down, and some of the Saccharomyces, and you might recognize that word as being our buddy yeast. So some of those make it down into the microbiome, but you can look at all the ones in the stomach that you ate in that yogurt, and you're like, well, they didn't really get down there. And that's why you've got to eat that yogurt every day. So
well, you're paying for 90% of what you're paying for. It isn't even getting to where you need it.
Well, okay, now I don't want to put yogurt in a bad light here because
be ice cream or be nothing yogurt.
I'm just saying, if you're eating it specifically for probiotics, you've got to take this next step into account. So let's jump over to that. So once these probiotics make it through the stomach acid and they get as far as the microbiome, you've got to feed them. You've got to feed them in order for them to flourish. And once you start feeding them, you don't even have to eat your yogurt every day because you've got the good bacteria in your gut, and that's what you want to work with. So let's go to the next slide. So how do we feed these things? Well, here's how we feed them. And this is going to take us back to my superhero bread baker icon here, where I've got these molecule structures. And what they are these very long worded names here that nutritionists are calling now Axos and Phos and Moss, etc. And these are very specific prebiotics that do not get broken down in the stomach. Let's see that in the next slide. I think I have a picture of how they don't get broken down. And there you go. They passed all exactly through the stomach, and they are down there, and they are a buffet of 4 different prebiotics for any of the Saccharomyces or the lactobacillus that made it through into your gut. And that's where the magic happens. That's where you are nourishing those probiotics that you are putting into your body. So feeding them with prebiotics is the second half of the equation, and that's what you as a bread baker or pizza maker can really help your customers understand. So let's go to the next. There you go. I was hoping I could show you now how to make a prebiotic pizza because Now you believe everything. So now I have to show you how to do it. So let's go to the next stuff. Yes.
I'm sorry, Amy Riolo. I just want to give a shout out to her. I hadn't seen her in a while since she helped judge one of our competitions. So,
all right,
she's happy. We're happy. That's why we're doing it.
Hey, Amy. All right. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. All right, let's go to our next slide. All right. So, where are the prebiotics located? And for the most part, prebiotics are in the whole grain. Specifically, they are in the outer bran and that layer above that few people really refer to, but it's called the aleuron. And mostly what happens when you grind that and then you package it, a lot of the value of that dissipates over time. So the best way to get full value of the prebiotics from your whole grain is to grind them yourself. And you can put them in your food mill, or you can put them in your Cuisinart or whatever you want. Excuse me, I'm a big fan of the Mock Mill tabletop mixer. And what I do is I put my whole grains in, and out of the chute, they go right into the dough. So they have minimal contact with air. They don't oxidize. They are right into fermentation. So they get the biggest value that way.
Very cool.
Let's see the next slide. I mean, really, you know what? You can just take those things and smash them with a hammer, really, to tell you the truth, and put them in, because once you break them down, then they're easier to hydrate, and that's when the prebiotics come out. So here is my, this is the whole grain prebiotic soaker that I have adapted. If you see on the left, it's a mixture of different kinds of grains, wheat, oats, and meal. And I put barley malt in there because that has the FOS in it as well. And you can use one or all or any other ones that you want in here. But this particular blend is a blend that gives you the 4 of the magical prebiotics that I showed you earlier. And how you make this simply is you take these grains, you soak them in, you can see a lot of water. And then I put a little bit of sour starter in there to facilitate the initial fermentation. You don't even need the sour starter. You can just use, you can just use yogurt. So, because that will start to break down the fibers. And what we want is those prebiotics to be loosened from the shell. So, and you soak these, you leave them at room temp overnight, and they're ready to go. So let's see the next slide.
So has this become almost like a starter type thing in itself?
It is exactly a starter in and of itself, Brian. Yes. Okay. And actually in artisan baking, we call it a soaker, which is, well, I guess why I put it in red. So, it's called a soaker. So now here's how you make the main dough. And you can write this down, or you can go to my website and you can pull it off of there. And actually, in probably within an hour, the formula itself will be posted as well. So you can download the PDF, and then there you go. And that's my homepage right there.
Yeah, it's right there. It's right there on the front, just that button. It does work. And you can drag the picture onto your desktop until it becomes downloadable. But you can get these on his website. Very easy, michaelkalanty.com. You can click it in the comments. I've already put it there for you. So continuing, sir, let's get back to your PowerPoint. So we're looking at our prebiotic whole grain pizza dough now.
Yes, so this is the whole grain pizza. Now, you see here that this is a sourdough-based pizza, right? We start out with half water and half sourdough starter, and then into that, we're putting our soaker. I put a little bit of yeast in this only because I want the push from this dough once it gets onto the stone, into the oven, in the deep dish pan, whatever. It's not necessary to have it in there. I just like it because it gives a little bit more aeration to the dough. And so there's that one. And this, of course, you've got to make the prebiotic soaker, you've got your sour starter, and then you're going to ferment this dough at least 24 or 48 hours as well. So this is not, oh, people are coming for dinner, let's make this. No, this is not that. Yeah. This is, if you've already got a sourdough formulation in your inventory, which based on, the last time Brian and I were together and we talked about it, gosh, I kind of hope you do have one. But anyway, so that's what this is. And so that's that. So that's if you're like hardcore and you really like, oh man, I want this. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, now, of course, whenever you change the makeup of your formulation, you're going to have a different texture, flavor. You're going to have a different pizza eating experience. So you have to come to grips with what are the trade-offs in that regard. I mean, okay, let's put all these prebiotics in our pizza, but it's going to affect how it tastes and what its texture is. So up here, I put the biggest changes for you right here, and you can see, because they got the soaker in there, the crumb is going to be moister and it's going to not be as explosive. I mean, if you're thinking of putting this into a like 800 degree pizza, like a Neapolitan pizza, etc., and it will work, and it does taste great, especially in a wood-fired oven, because all those grains bring out the umami once they're in there. Really, it's a stunningly aromatic pizza. But the textural difference is that the crumb size that we come to see is it's a little bit diminished because the soaker, the prebiotics, don't let the dough expand as much, and we don't have as much of a crisp bottom. So if you want to do one of those, really cracker thin New York style pizzas, this is not going to work for you in that regard. All right.
But it's not, well, I was just going to say, but it's not like it's like undercooked, because it almost sounded like that picture was painted. You were saying it's softer, but it's a good way. It's a good softer. It's not underdone. It's more that spongy, soft chew. It adds more chew, I think is what you were saying.
It adds more chew in a, well, the thing about the chew that I have found is that sometimes when you choose certain pizza formulations, they become cohesive and they kind of like ball up in some kind of way as you're chewing them. And, if you got like cheese and sauce in there, it's nice, man. It's a nice gooey center. But when you put the prebiotic soaker in, it actually makes the chew, I'm going to say, cleaner, because when you bite through it, the pieces don't go back and cohere together. So it becomes more like a meat eating experience. So like when you would chew a steak or something like that, it doesn't it's not getting gummy. It's just, you're getting a lot of chew for your money. So,
Well, and that's just all about that crumb density. I think you painted that picture nicely. So,
all right. So,
and vividly, I'll put it.
All right. Let's see what else we got here.
Well, there we go. So okay, I guess I jumped ahead.
There you go. So it must be right, because there it is. So yeah. And,
all right. So
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the more variety equals the more meaty bite and less spring back. So, all right. So everything we just said. All right, here we go. Something new to talk about.
You know what? Do me a favor, Brian. Just go back onto that, because I have a thought. And we're back at the one thing that I was just on the East Coast, so I was working a lot with these and seeing what the East Coast's palate has to say about doughs of this texture and everything. Because being in San Francisco, we have a different perception of, and also different flour strains than what we're used to. And the thing that I did notice was that this worked really especially well in a I want to say, a plant-based or almost vegan type of situation. Certainly in a vegetarian, because having that meaty chew and putting a cheese, whether it's a nut-based cheese or a plant-based cheese or even, a mozzarella, it gave really a cleaner, more enjoyable pizza eating experience to a vegetarian style pizza that sometimes you don't get. And that was a surprise for me from a sensory perspective. I was happy to see that.
Well, I don't want to say vegetarian and vegan places they're on the rise. It's not a trend or a fad. It's something that's going to be here to stay. It's just becoming more prevalent now. So for them to get in line with having prebiotics, and this also adds to the health aspect of vegetarian or vegan choices.
There you go. And there is an overlap in consumers, the group of consumers that are vegetarian or plant-based or vegan or whatever, and are driven by a functional food call out, and I'm not saying all vegans want prebiotics or something like that, but many of them do. Do. So.
All right, here we go. Let's next slide.
What else we got? Okay, I think we talked about that one enough. Oh, okay. Now, here's the really interesting thing is that when you are soaking and pre-fermenting all of these grains, etc., the one thing that you really bring out in all of that soaker is the umami taste. And when you add that into a pizza, which, and let's face it, pizza is, if you did Wikipedia for what is umami, it would show you pizza, because the tomato has umami, the cheese has it. The second you even bring any kind of meat out onto it, you have it. And then the caramelization and the Maillard amplifies all of that. So when you take this prebiotic soaker and you put that into something which is really the essence of umami, it takes it to the next power, and it just really, you can smell it before it arrives to the table. And of course, smelling and seeing really enhance the actual eating process. We all know that. So, okay. What else we got? Oh, so I showed you, make a starter, make a soaker, do all this, have it 5 days later. All right. You're like, okay, well, what if I just want one right now? How do I do it? And yes, you can do it. And let me show you how. So there's this company called Food First, and they make a product called Prebiotic, and you see it there in the brown bag. And what they have done is they have taken a blend of wheat and oats and bran and organic barley malt. They have fermented it, they have dried it, and they have concentrated it. So you can take a powdered additive from this Prebiotic pack and simply add that to whatever is your best-selling pizza on your menu, no matter what it is. And just put that in, and you say, okay, now with prebiotics. And they stand up to baking. It doesn't affect your floor time, etc. It's just, you just add it. So let's take a look at the next slide.
Well, and I did want to let everybody know that I did just put the website where you can get that online. Can people find these in grocery stores, or do they have to find it online, do you think?
You know what? In my formula, on Amazon, that's the best place to buy it. I don't know what their distribution is with grocery stores yet, whether they're in Whole Foods, but I know you can get it on Amazon. In fact, it's got the Amazon Choice banner on it when you look up prebiotics or probiotics for that matter. And there it is. Yeah. And there it is. So, okay, you see it, tells you what you can do. Let's go to the next slide.
It is, my mouse is dying. Here we go.
Okay, here you go. So I've done a lot of different bench work with it, and I have come to a 2% number as being the most, well, I think the easiest to remember, the easiest to multiply, and also the one that brings the probiotics to the dough with enough flavor, but it doesn't override what your dough initially tastes like. So it supports the dough. It doesn't overpower it. And certainly you can put more in if you want. And I've gone as high as 4% with it, especially with when I'm using a vegetarian topping. If I'm just going to put a lot of vegetables on cheese on, I will amp up the probiotin powder in there to bring more of that umami flavor.
Okay. Very good. And then this is just basically anybody can add just 2% to their current baker's percent or dough formula.
That is exactly right. That is exactly right. And you know that you can go to the next slide because I think the formula is up there, Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And you know that I have to say I love Baker's Percent because you don't have to add all the ingredients up and divide each ingredient by everything, the way that nutrition panels are worked out. All you have to do is say, hey, I have 100% of flour. I'm going to put 2% of something else in. And you put it in. And, you know, my students are always like, oh, Baker's percentage is so hard. I'm like, no, it's not. You just, like, don't add anything. So, anyway, so that is my go-to quick dough pizza that I use in a lot of classes, etc. I make it up ahead of time. I bring it. We make it. It just like works really quick and easy. And all I did was take 2% of the probiotin and add it to that. And, you know, it actually makes the pizza brown up a little bit faster, which in a home oven is an advantage. You get the color
absolutely
before you're drying the dough out.
Yeah, I can attest to that for sure. So, all right. Well, I guess, are we at that time now?
We're at the Q&A. So,
all right. So again, anybody type in your questions or in the comment section or on the Facebook or the YouTubes or wherever you are watching this. I'm going to actually lay this down, but there were a few questions that came in.
Nice.
Now, I think, well, here we go. Let's just jump over here. Cyber, the Robolaxian. Nice name. That's cool. I like it.
That's great.
What is the best pizza dough recipe? This somebody else said. Well, I have other questions that are similar to that. But what is the best pizza dough recipe? Now, Cyber, do you mean for prebiotics or just in general? Because one's a loaded question and the other could be a loaded question too. What do you think, Mike?
Okay. So, hey, Cyber, love the name. Really, totally love it. I think you can be part of my superhero team with the probiotics. You know, it really comes down to, you know what, as a baker, as a bread baker, it always comes down to the oven. Everything. You can do whatever you want. You can soak, you can pre-soak, blah, 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 blah. You can do 100 things. But it comes down to what formulation works in your oven. And that's something that I deal a lot of times with my manufacturers. There's like, oh, well, we heard that this is the very best flour that we should use. But you know what? They don't have the oven that can take advantage of that. So it really has to do with what type of oven you have. And the other side of it is, what do your clients want? What do they like? And matching those two things up, in my opinion, is the best pizza.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it sounds like, and I do have several other questions, like I said, and I think they all revolve around kind of recipe question.
Good. Yeah.
But I mean, it sounds like most you can turn anybody's dough recipe into something prebiotics, because either you do it with your soaker or you do it with the biotin.
Or you put the biotin in. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, I'm going to ask these questions.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm going to ask the questions anyway, in case there is a different answer. But let's just say that, I mean, there was one as far as along the lines of the recipe. Are there any particular grains that are better for prebiotics, or say for the soaker? Is there any particular? I know you had
That's a great question.
Oats, meals.
That is a great question. And that, in fact, was my very first question when I started to say, all right, how am I going to make my prebiotic soaker? And by far, the one that you want to take starring role in your mix is whole wheat, whole grain wheat. And it's not really a question of soft wheat, hard wheat, winter wheat. It's not really that, because the prebiotics are in the brand to the maximum level in wheat. The second one on the line is oats. And we all know that oats is so good for you. You have it every day for breakfast. You should have it. I didn't used to, but now I do. I love it. And flaxseed. Flaxseed has the FOS in it, the FOS, the fructose oleosaccharide. And so that is also beneficial. And then barley malt is just a really big kicker. So you can put anything in there. I've made it with rye, and I've made it with buckwheat. Buckwheat works well in smaller doses because it brings a really earthy quality. And if you're going to make a mushroom and like gooey cheese pizza, putting some buckwheat in there just really amplifies the forest aroma aspect of mushrooms and things like that. So that works really well. And the rye I particularly like because it brings sweetness. So if you're going to put vegetables on the top, the rye accents that sweetness. People don't think that. A lot of times people think of rye, they think of like caraway seeds and things like that, and anise, etc. But the rye seed all by itself, I mean, if you just take some rye seeds and really just start chewing on them like the grain farmers do, which is where I learned that, you chew on that thing for 5 minutes and it just starts to taste like vegetable sugar to you. And well, to me. And so I have found that those work really well. But the char really is the wheat. The wheat should take up half of the percentage of what your mix is. That's a good question.
Oh, okay, so at least 50% make wheat and then almost experiment like you were doing. But great answer. Great question. Thanks again.
Yeah, that is a good question.
I was going to say cyber. I can't remember who asked that. But there is another question that was about actually hydration. And Mick,
yes.
I'm going to get your question up there real quick. He says he remembers that the late Dr. Lehman suggesting keeping the hydration higher for whole wheat pizza dough. What's your take on that? Is 60% enough for the prebiotic whole wheat dough? Because I know that's what you have on your I believe that's what you had on yours as well, was 60%, right? Oh, wait, no. This is the whole grain pizza dough is 40%. I guess the question I had earlier was, is there a optimal hydration?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that goes along with what Mick's asking. So I'll let you go ahead and take it away, Mike.
No, that is a very good question, Mick, and thank you for bringing that up. And do me a favor, Brian, would you put that formula back up on the page there so I can help people
this one or this one?
that one.
Okay, I'm going to move your question, Mick, so we can see it. There we go.
All right, great. All right, so the thing that I want to explain about how I write formulations is that, I mean, if you look at this and you say, okay, flour, 100%. All right, we all know that. And then you look at the water and you say water, that's 40%. You're like, whoa, dude, you can't even make bagels at that low of a hydration. What are you talking about? Okay, so I don't break the formulas down into a commercialized format. When you get a big recipe, it's broken out and they say, okay, the ultimate, and this is what I think Mick's question is, the ultimate hydration of this dough is 60% or 61% or something. Because look at it, you've got water in the water, you've got it in the starter, you've got it in the prebiotic soaker, and you also have a liquid in the form of the oil, which counts as the hydration. So I don't put that all together and then make the baker break it out separately. I look at, okay, here's what I'm making. I'm making 100 100 grams of flour, let's say, I want 40 grams of water for that, and then I want 40 grams of starter.
Oops. I'm sorry. Damn it, Jim. I'm a baker, not a doctor. I was trying to put it up there. 60 to 61% on or about is what you were saying. So, but it's
okay. Wait, am I getting too down the rabbit hole on this or what?
No, not at all. I messed up your flow. I put up a wrong graphic and it made myself laugh. So I do apologize. I'm going to hide this. 60 to 61%. Continue, sir.
All right. So anyway, so those are the weights of the ingredient that you would already have on hand. Like the prebiotic soaker, you already made that. So it's got water in it. So you only want 30% of that based on your flour. So anyway, so next question is, doesn't whole wheat want more hydration? And the answer is absolutely yes, because anytime that you use a whole grain, which includes the bran, you need more water because the bran soaks up more water than the endosperm. So you need more water for that. So the answer here is that by taking the grains and grinding them and soaking them ahead of time, you're actually giving them that moisture at that point. So when they get into your main dough, they're not looking for extra water that they can rob from something else. So, and if you work out how much water is in each one of these ingredients on my main dough formula, you actually come out with 61.2%. And keep in mind, though, that is based on AP flour. And the flour I use is from the Central Milling. I use their Artisan Baker's Choice. And that has a protein content of, I think, 11.9. I think. I'm not sure. Nikki Justo, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I'm not, as good as you are. But this formula was made from that flour. So, and if you're using go ahead.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I was just going to say it's that like from the last video where you were teaching us about making these starters, that when you replace part of your starter and refill it, you've already got the water and flour in there. So that is basically where the rest of that water, that's why it's only at 40% hydration, because the rest of that hydration is already in those premixes that you've done.
Exactly. So. Yes. And I see that you put the quick dough up there, and that has a 60% hydration, which is right in the ballpark. And if you wanted to change that to a whole wheat and substitute 200 grams of whole wheat into that 450 of AP flour, yes, you would probably have to. And I usually use 10% based on that difference. So that would be what? That's like 250. That's like 40%. So that's 4% more water. So I would up my whole wheat to 64%.
Okay. Well, see, I mean, you got the math right there. So, Mick, you're right on the ball. So your question was, the answers were yes and no? I don't know. I can't remember exactly.
You know what, Mick? You know what? I'll say this, Mick. And really, it is a really good question. And I gave a lot of detail that maybe is like, oh, I don't know. Who cares about all that math, right? The answer is, which hydration works best for your dough in your environment? Is it a humid environment or are you in Denver? And then how does that work in the oven? I mean, if you have an 800-degree oven, you kind of want a little bit more water to turn into steam when you're in there. So it's always a question of what you as a pizza maker or a baker feel is the best.
Well, and we're just here to kind of give them a starting point, just to start from, and then everybody should experiment and keep testing beyond that. So I did have one more question here. Again, this is the last chance to go ahead and write in your questions and comments. I thank you, everybody, for your attention and all the questions and comments you've had. Now, this one, again, you've kind of talked about it, and I don't know if there's necessarily one particular answer, but what is the best length of fermentation if you're trying to create a good prebiotic dough? Now, it sounds like it doesn't necessarily, it comes from the fermentation, but if you do it quickly, it doesn't have to. So if you're trying to build prebiotics naturally, what is the optimal time? How long do you let it proof for? The minimum amount, I guess.
And this is if we're doing it in, I'll call it the old school way, the sourdough way,
yes.
right?
Yeah, not the quick way. Yeah.
Okay. So I generally work with those doughs. I use 48 hours as my target.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay.
And again, I look at, because I don't have a nutritionist on hand to take samples at different points and say, oh, well, this has the most and stuff like that. I take it on principle that there are the prebiotics in there because I'm following the guidelines. And then what I do is, starting at 48 hours, I go, all right, now which one of these pizzas is going to work better for me? Which is going to handle better, which is going to stretch out better, which is going to bake better, which is going to rise the way I want it to.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I'll make one at 36, and then I'll make one at 60, and I'll see what those endpoints are, and then I dial in from there. And because in the end, I'd rather have a pizza that people say, oh my God, this is the best pizza I've ever had, than one that they say, well, okay, well, these are the most prebiotics I ever ate. So, and so it's always for me, and I don't mean to be flip about it, but, that's always the way I look at things is like, look, it's food and we're making it because it's fun and it's good. So if we can make it healthier by putting some other stuff in it, let's do that.
Okay. Well, like you said, I think I had heard you at some point throughout the presentation mention 48 hours. And I was wondering if that was going to be the penultimate answer to it, but it sounds like at least 40 hours. And then from there, unless you get, like you said, somebody coming and taking a core sample and telling you how many prebiotics are in there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, I will say, if we're doing if you're doing the quick one where you're just adding the probiotin, right, where you take a straight up one, actually, I would reduce the amount of dry yeast in that, and I would ferment that for 60 to 72 hours. I find that is the best performance for that dough in terms of flavor, stretchability, and baking character.
And again, saying 70, this mouse says, there we go. Again, saying 72 hours, this recipe is quick because you don't have to build a starter, build a soaker, and then ferment. That's why it's quick. Still ferment it for like 72 hours.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, that's about all the questions I had here. Otherwise, we could continue to go. I mean, I could come up with questions, but we're pushing the hour. If anybody missed this or came in late, you can go see it on pizzatv.com. We're going to have it up there. It'll live forever on Facebook. Mike, is there anything that we missed that you wanted to tell people and then kind of give us a good positive note to end on, buddy?
Yeah, you know what? Just continue making the best pizza that you know how. And if any of this information strikes a chord with you, then great, bring it in. And if it all just seems like, oh, I don't know, then that's okay too. Because, as I showed you in the demographics, not all demographic groups react to things in the same way. So if it hits you, I'm happy to help you.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I do want to thank you again for coming out into our new season of PMQ Live Update. We're dusting off the cobwebs and getting back into it. And I always love it when we can have such a great informative presentation. So I want to thank you again. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I did want to let you know that Mick says he thanks you for all the clarity. He's in India, and he says it's very hot over there. So I want to, again, international audience. We had international last week, too. So
Mick, use cold water for sure, and really cut your yeast down like at least by half, because if you go 72 hours in India, I don't want to be eating that though.
You should have led with that, Mick. Might have changed the whole answer.
Thanks for watching that, Mick. Yeah, Ron, appreciate that.
Absolutely. So stay tuned to PMQ, guys. Our Facebook, it'll let you know when we have our next PMQ live update. I hope you guys all stay safe and stay sane. I want to thank you again, Michael Kalanty, Artisan Bread Baker and author. You can find out everything you need to know about him at michaelkalanty.com. It's a clickable link in the chat. So we'll see you guys next time. But until then, stay safe and stay sane.
Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.